Hello everyone, this is Jimmy Cultist back again with another turn-based combat video. And today we're going to be doing something of monumental strength and importance. Just do L1 and R2 to copy this brick for expediency, and we're going to make it gold. The subject we're covering today is how to level up or create a level up screen. I must admit that the process of leveling up is probably something, we can explain how you would create the process, but the actual, the nitty-gritty of how much it takes to level up and all that kind of stuff, that's like a deeper game dev kind of subject that goes beyond what we can show you in a cursory video, so I'd say that's something you're going to have to work out for yourself, but we're going to give you a few pointers on how you could set that up, at the very least. So the first thing we gotta do is make sure this is invisible and non-collidable. And we're gonna take out a selector, one of our favorite things to do. And we're gonna take out this handy-dandy little trigger zone, which we are going to set to detect tag. A tag specifically called tally, and basically this is going to activate our cube once we tally up the score of the enemy. I'm going to take out a timeline, set it to play once, connect this to the power of the timeline, and on the timeline we're going to put a microchip. We'll come back to it later. For now we got one other thing to do. We're going to set this to detect a tag. P2, I believe it should be. And we're also going to set it back to cube instead of in scene. And you may be wondering, what is the purpose of this? And why P2 and not P1? Well, P1 and P2 and all those various tags connect to these players. And basically we're trying to figure out a simple way of giving a score to a player. Like, if you want him to receive XP instead of him, how would you go about doing that? And the simplest way I can think of is most characters, when they attack, are out over here, in front of the enemy, fighting them. Now, what about ranged characters, How would you trigger this? Well, we'll figure that out later, but basically you just put a tag on the timeline that sticks out when they're doing ranged attacks. There's a lot of ways to compensate for that. Oh, by the way, you're going to want to open 3 ports, and you're going to want to take this out of A and put it in B, and take this one and put it in C. We're also going to rename this P3. Now, why do we have no P1? That's because the natural state of the selector is always A, therefore we don't need another one. Something to bear in mind. Now in here, we're going to set up our variable modifier, which is going to allow us to gain XP. Here is a variable modifier. The first one we are going to name P1 EXPTM. TM for trademark. No, actually it stands for temp. I don't know how you'd put temp in abbreviation, maybe just T. It kind of depends on what you want to do. We're going to set it to continuous. Now there's some downsides to making it continuous. As long as this thing is playing, it will be triggering the variable, and you could potentially get a lot of points, in a single run. It's something you have to mathematically work out, how many seconds per, per inch on the timeline or whatever equals the right score. But I think it's much better because it makes leveling up more satisfying to see those numbers go up gradually rather than just, boom, you have 100 XP. That's just me, though. We're going to set it to 5.0. And we're going to copy out this other one. And the only difference is we're going to remove the TM part. This is going to be our permanent XP. Now, what's the difference between temporary and permanent? Well, if you're in a fight and you want to know exactly how much XP you gain during the fight, we're going to have a temporary variable that says TM, And basically that'll display your temporary score, which will be erased after the fight is over. Then there'll be your permanent score, which is your total of XP gained over many battles. You get my drift, I think. And we're going to label this microchip 1, and we might make it something memorable, like a cup. That should be pretty good. Alright, number 2 and number 3. We're going to have to go in here individually and change these scores naturally to the corresponding character. So P1 is going to have to be changed to P2 for the second one, and P3 for the third. Oops. P2. Make sure you get it right, though. These labels are very important. P3 and P3. My controller stick is a bit sloppy these days, so it's kind of difficult to type things out. Anyway, now that you've put all of these, number 1, into the power of the chip, basically when one of these is active, it'll play this, and I think you get the idea. It'll give the score to our player. Now that should pretty much do it, except for one tiny little thing we have to do. This thing is completely ready, however, how are we going to make it come out when our enemy, dies, and how do we get that to happen? Well, we're going to pull our enemy up here just for convenience. He's emitted, so, But basically what we're dealing with is the enemy has a death chip and a timeline that plays before death. You're going to want to trigger this as soon as possible while the player is still, within range to receive the variable, to trigger the variable information. So we're going to want to put this here and just scope out first. And once you've selected the proper object, just grab this little white thing here and move it in front of the enemy. And that should do nicely. This is, of course, probably going to require a little bit of, like I said, planning to get right. Oh, one other thing you might want to bear in mind is, since this thing, once it tallies up its score, we do want it to be destroyed. We don't want it to pile up in the scene and be a big hunk of junk that's going to run down the thermo. But it will be around even after the enemy is dead, because we set the lifetime. Let's go back here and look at it. The lifetime is currently at infinite, so it'll be around until it's destroyed by other means. That's pretty good. Alright, now we're going to get into the real thick of it, which is a lot of different stuff. There's a few things I have to fix up with the players beforehand. These are just tiny little quality of life changes that I figured we might as well get to in this video. But basically, if you go all the way back here to controls, and you go to character select, and you see X right here, it'd be very useful if whenever we pressed X there was an automatic input delay. I think I already had a system for this earlier, but I would like an even more redundant system just to make sure, because I have experienced some issues where the delay is not proper and the character goes through options way too fast. So having this will make me extra satisfied that we're in good hands when it comes to input delay. That should work fine. Alright. Hopefully that thing... is that the one that connects... We want to make sure we get X at its most rudimentary position. Oh, this is actually where we would want it. Scratch what I just did there. Press triangle, delete that animation. We'll just move the timeline over here. You want it at the most base position, you know, the closest connector to this, because if we hit this one, this will cause a delay in character select, but none of the other menus. We want this one, because this is the very earliest input we have. It's most closely related to the parent controller sensor, I suppose you'd say. It's the root node. Anyway, now that that's done, we're going to get over to our more important business, which is enemy actions. Alright, so here in enemy actions, we do have a little bit of a problem where our current setup is not conducive to receiving a turn pass where the next turn goes in succession. So basically all we gotta do to fix this problem is take out a switch and a tiny little tag at the end here, and we're gonna label it Team Go. And this basically is gonna guarantee that when the enemy's turn is over, it's gonna trigger this this piece of logic for reset. Team Go resets the player's abilities to attack and all that. Now you're probably thinking, well, Jimmy, what if they're triggered out of order? You don't want it to end prematurely. Well, luckily, I've thought of that. This is what the switch is for. We're going to go ahead and copy 3 of these switches. And we're also going to copy this tag. Always put it after the rest of the timeline, by the way. But basically what this does is we're going to have it so that these things cannot be triggered unless all of the turns have been taken. So first up, we're going to have this one. And you're probably wondering, well, what does this do? Well, we're going to delete its input, which is here, its animation. And instead, we're going to shut off all these other switches adjacent. And we're going to do the same thing with this one. Also, make sure that it's long enough that it overlaps past the tag, because we specifically wanted going beyond the tag. Delete these, and shut off all these. Basically, the rule of thumb, if you want to calibrate these animations, is shut off anything but what is below the timeline. So basically, below the timeline is this switch, shut off these ones. And that should work just fine, or at least if everything goes according to plan. Now that that's done, we may be able to do the second half. I think we're going to have to go to, what is it called? We're going to have to create a HUD for our characters so that when this is all complete, as it were, it can close out and we can have like a little ending tally of scores and whatnot. But we're going to have a little thing like this, which we're going to label complete, which is basically when the turn is done, when we've destroyed all enemies successfully, this thing is going to play. Alright, so what we're going to do here is go inside the complete chip and take out this trigger zone, and it's going to be labeled to detect a foe. Specifically, it has to be a label, cannot be set to tag, otherwise it won't work properly. We're going to turn these extra detection options on just in case we have a rather strange enemy that's invisible or something. You really never know. And we're going to expand this cube so that it covers the entire scene, so that no matter how big or small our enemy is, they'll be inside this box. We're not going to set it to in scene, because then it would detect stuff down there, and we don't want that, so... Anyway, that should work just fine. Now we're going to take out a NOT gate, and a little handy-dandy node. Connect, connect. And we're going to take out a timeline. Set it to play once. Connect the node to the power. And you may be wondering, Jimmy, won't this just be active as soon as the enemies spawn in? And it's true that when they spawn in, it will temporarily shut off this NOT gate, but it'll probably play this timeline prematurely anyway, because Dreams has a bit of a delay in that regard, so it will cause us trouble. Now the question is, how can we prevent this from happening? Well, we just take out a counter, connect this to the plus symbol, and then we just stick it in there like that. And that'll create the input delay that we want. Now we're going to open up the timeline, make it yellow, label it complete. And on the timeline, we're going to put a bunch of useful junk. To explain real quick what this thing does, since it's set to label foe, as soon as a foe is detected, it's going to shut off this NOT gate and prevent the timeline from playing. Now you may be wondering, oh wait a minute, I made a mistake. This should not be a counter. This should be a timer. The reason being is we want a little bit, we want to be able to control the delay. And if we can't control it, that's kind of bad. We'll set it to 2. But basically what we're talking about is still true of this. It's just the difference is, it's a timer and not a counter. But basically, when the enemies are in the scene, they're going to be shutting off this NOT gate. So basically, when you remove all the enemies and they're dead, it's going to trigger the completion of the scene. And we're going to have a couple of cameras. We're going to have like a little panning motion, something dramatic, to kind of give you a sense of victory. I believe Final Fantasy does this, I'm not really sure. But that music that plays... Da 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 da, something like that. And we're going for something similar to that. Little panning camera motion. Makes things feel satisfying. And we might actually just have that. You're also going to want a general view of the characters, because we don't really know who's going to be present or where they're going to be. So if a camera just generally covers the entire 3 character slots or whatever, it's probably going to be a good safe bet. Now we're going to want a tiny little switch. Basically all this thing is going to do is shut off the timer. It may do a few other things, but for now that's what it does. We're also going to put this in here, which is a tag. And you'll notice that earlier we set up a zone set to detect a tag named Tally. Well, this is the tag in question. And this is going to begin the countdown of events. Also, go in here and make sure this is set to disable controller input, because you really don't want the player to be fumbling with the controls during a cutscene. Who knows what might happen. We're also going to lay out a little timeline. I'm going to talk about this later. But for now, we're going to leave it blank. And then we're going to go over here. And we're about to get into the part that I think is the real thick of it in terms of this is pretty much why this video is going to take a long time, is this part. But we're going to name this score. I guess you could actually call it level up also. Let's call it level up. Alright, so what's inside of level up exactly? Well, first we're going to have a counter. This time it really is a counter and not a timer that we want. And we're going to have a dialogue text displayer, which we are going to type in this gibberish. Then we are going to set it prompt to X, and we're going to label this continue. Now you're probably wondering, what does this do? Well, you'll understand later. Turn off this setting. Prompt to close, very important. We're also going to turn off some of these visual settings. I would just like it to be blank white letters, personally. I'm going to put it down there where it won't get in the way. I'm going to put continue in the corner, but basically what this is going to operate as is when we're done, we want to be able to leave. So just take the counter full, output, put it in there. Take out a node, go to text active output and put it into the node. That should do nicely. Then we're going to take out this little handy dandy microchip, which we are going to make purple. And we're going to call this HUD. That may not be the most accurate description of what it's called. Maybe leaderboard would make more sense, but we're going to leave it HUD for now. Now down below, we're going to have a little timeline, and we're going to get into this later, but for now we're just going to call it reset and set it to play once. The big arduous task that remains in front of us is to set up, the HUD itself. However, before we do that, we might as well get our variables in place. Set the minimum value to 0, and the maximum can remain 1000, although depending on what you're going to do, you might want to change that. We call this P1 XPTM. Then we're going to copy it and call this one P1 XP. And this is going to be our permanent XP, which will carry over from scene to scene. So persist in Dream is a must if you want that. And we're just going to go ahead and copy these out. It's going to be a little bit of a chore. You may be wondering why we aren't putting them in the HUD chip. Well, it's because we want these to be constantly active at all times. Now we're going to copy this out. Oh, wait a minute. We actually just want to remove the TM. That's all we have to do. And don't forget to set this. Persist in Dream. Very important. Remove the TM. That's our permanent and, well, temporary XP accounted for. Now comes the big system. And for this, I'm going to go ahead and copy things because we're kind of we're in a bit of a hurry, probably. We're going to get to this later. Mainly, I just want our character names. I suppose they might be in the stats. Let's see if they're in the stats. No, they're not. Probably in character select, actually. Over here, probably. No, that's the something else. Where are those character stats? Oh, they're probably here. No, wait a minute, that's backdrop. Maybe they're in select? I think that's just an arrow. Yeah, that's gotta be somewhere in here. I think it is in character select, we're just not looking hard enough. Oh, here it is, character UI. We're just gonna go ahead and copy these, because we'll want the names of these people. Gonna put this one up here. We are copying the, oh, by the way, for the sake of getting this all arranged, since this isn't active, we're going to need something to power this node on so that we can just see what we're doing. Only for temporary sake, though. Here's the names of our characters in order. You could arrange this however you like. I'm just going to do it this way because that's how I prefer. And we're going to go ahead and set this a few layers ahead. I think at least 5. And we're going to set these to at least 6 in the sort order. Maybe 7 just to be cautious. And we could rearrange these names based off of, you know, the updated positions and all that of the boxes. It can be kind of annoying doing this stuff just because it's very cluttery and difficult to select things. But it looks snappy, which is the main thing. I'm going to go ahead and turn this off for now, just so it won't interfere. And we're going to do something a little bit odd, which you may be wondering about. And we're going to go ahead and turn off the show text box option. Then we're going to shrink this down. Make it wider. We're also going to make the border larger, so it'll show up more. But basically this box is going to act as our temporary XP box. Completely unnecessary, it's just a visual flair. But this stuff kind of affects how players view the game. If it's really slapdash and lacks style, they kind of feel, well, you know, it doesn't really get you excited to play a game when it's sort of, what is the word? No effort. I'm going to set this to 8 to be safe. And this is going to be our temporary score. Let's go ahead and get that in there. I'm going to shrink this down also. We can also get rid of this black box in the background. It's not necessary. As for what kind of zeros or whatever you want to use, it's all up to you. I think I'll go with this one. Let's check it out just to see what it looks like. 25,000. Yeah, that looks good to me. We're going to make it yellow. 2% brightness. You want a little brightness so that it feels like you got something of value. Move this down here. Sorry if this is kind of visually cluttered, but this is how you make menus in Dreams. For the most part. There's other ways, of course. Now we're just going to label these temp to stand in for our temporary score, and we're going to copy them out and rename them to con, which means constant. A constant variable, as it were. I've been taking a few Godot courses. The language is starting to infect me. And this is going to be our permanent score. Alright, let me see. Make sure this is all labeled properly before you do this. And then just stick it in the number range. Current value, number range. And we're going to go ahead and test to make sure that these things are properly working. I'm going to set this to 500. It's working. Gonna have to rewind scene. Oh, one thing I forgot, which is a bit of a, you know, now that I think about it, this is a bit of a no-brainer. Bit of an important, definitely want to do this sort of thing. I'm gonna copy this out. EXP gain. But this is kind of actually a thing that you want to put in here just to make sure people know what's going on, because somebody who's uninitiated is going to be like, well, what do these numbers mean? So you want to have a handy little label. On a side note, may I just say that JRPGs, or even stuff that's just sort of related to that, you know, Eastern RPGs, or whatever you want to say, they tend to have a lot of complexity. Like, there's so many systems and things, it's very confusing sometimes. Perhaps I'm just dumb. But it does feel like perhaps over there they just enjoy complication. Anyway, here's XP total. Gonna move the number down so it doesn't interfere with the total. I think we might as well delete those and just take this and go down the scale like so. There. Without further ado, I think we might be ready finally to begin our test. However, there is still one thing remaining, which is basically, you know, this fellow down here. What's going to happen to him? How do we get him back to normal? Basically, all you're going to need is to go to this old selector here. And this is what reset was meant for, just in case you were wondering. You're going to put a little wiper on here, set it to go black, fade out. And we're going to take a little switch and connect it to this here. Actually, we're going to connect it to this timeline. But basically all this does is it puts the camera directly behind our player with a cut. Also limits his controls briefly. And this should reset everything in accordance with our plans. We're going to take another switch. It might feel a bit redundant to have all these switches. I guess alternatively you could just put this in A. You'd start out with this brief little camera phase. Also, since we're not testing anymore, we can go ahead and remove this NOT gate. Probably move this up too. And we're going to want to connect the thing, you know, the switch, this one, to our counter. And I think that should do it. Now there is one other little tiny tiddly wink thing you could do. Set sort order to 0. But basically we can take this and create sort of a synthetic background in case you want to hide all your players' doings. I don't know. It depends on what you're looking for, honestly. I wanted to do this last because working with all that other stuff while this is in the picture is very confusing. Keep that in mind if you're ever constructing menus. But we're going to go ahead and give this system a little run through. Hopefully everything works as it should. Holmes Vegeta has a built-in attack that'll basically just kill the enemies instantly, so he's the best person to just test this out, see if we get the XP we want. Alright, that sort of worked like what we want, but we have a few other issues. For one, I forgot to go to this keyframe. Now what does this keyframe do? Well, it's going to turn off this so that we can't, you know, we can't prematurely press continue before everything's done. And we're going to set this to smooth, because it wasn't on smooth. So we got jerky camera movements going on. The next thing that we got going on is we're going to want the HUD completely shut off. We want no active HUD during this little cutscene. Anyway, that should do nicely. Also, one little thing we will cover real quick. About his ranged attack, you're probably wondering how to make the XP or whatever, you know. How do we get that to happen? Well, P2, all you gotta do is just put it at the end of his attack around here. It won't be active all the time, so it shouldn't interfere with all of our other logic, but basically this P2, just put it far enough out and it should trigger the XP properly. Another thing you could do is increase, since this block is always facing forward, we can increase these from side to side, which will increase the chances that things will be detected properly when they're, you know, over to the right or over to the left. It's more forward that you have to be careful because player might trigger that by accident just by moving. Anyway, let's go ahead and see how this works. And as always, Holmes is our most adequate test subject. There, we got a little cutscene. You could add some music. That was a bit abrupt, I will say. We also have a problem where the HUD comes back into focus. So something you might do is take shut off HUD and just stick it in here for the duration. We're also going to want to take this and put it in the reset count so that when this is all over, everything goes back to being hunky-dory. Everything gets reset, that is. Because we don't want that to be on when we come back into an attack, you know, fight or whatever. Nice. Now, of course, these two counts are the same because we don't have any XP built up over time, but ideally, you know, if you've done it before, this number would be higher and this one would be like the current score that you gained. By the way, we're also going to want something that resets these to 0. A variable modifier, because you wouldn't want that score to build up just like the other one. Actually, we could just go ahead and go in here, copy these, and then just loot their remains. Perfect. Delete. Much quicker than having to type all that stuff out all over again. Only grab the temporary score, not the permanent score. All you gotta do is set these to reset, and I think that'll just automatically put everything at 0. We'll see how that works. I know one thing, our XP gainer is working a lot better than expected. I was a bit worried that it might not detect his tag even with the appropriate, you know, things that we used. Then we'll press continue, and we'll go back here. You might also want something that when you press continue, it shuts off the controls and makes sure that you can't use them. We'll put this a little further back. That might reset it quicker. And we'll put hide HUD on here. Let's go ahead and test it again. I just want to be absolutely certain. Now for the abruptness of the menu, there's some things that, you know, you could do to make that less so, but we're not really going to cover that because that's a lot of extra work. I think for now, it just showing up like it does is forgivable. Well, that was definitely weird. What happened there? Maybe we reset it too early? I'm gonna go ahead and shut this off. Oh, by the way, we made a mistake. Always remember to press this. Take this back to the beginning. Shut that off. But that'll guarantee we can't press anything until the time is right. I'm not sure where our player kind of leaped into the air. That must have been us pressing X or something. We'll try this one last time. The system is more or less working as intended. We've got a few random hiccups here and there, but these are relatively minor. That I don't like. Something's not working as in properly. This is not... It is set to cut. You know, maybe I'm going to go back and do this the way we previously intended, which is cut first. trigger this way. Maybe there's a reason why I did that. I just couldn't remember. I'm gonna go ahead and stretch this out also. But that should give us time for all the good things to work out in our favor. Go ahead and use the grenade. We'll find out how well the score taker works at this range. That savagely annoys me. What could be going wrong here? This should not be operable at all, and yet it's somehow working. We shut off power, and yet it's somehow still operating. It makes no sense to me. How about instead of pressing reset, we'll just leave it at that. We'll try it without the reset, find out what happens. That is so annoying. Wait a second. I think I have a possible idea as to what might be happening. Is this set to disable controller input? It is. Is this set to controller? It is. Oh, wait a minute. I think I know a simple fix. We'll just put a camera in here. Doesn't have to even be facing anything in particular. If you want, you could be facing the characters. And we'll put that to controller sensor disable. And we'll copy it on here. Just to see if this solves the issue. I'm pretty sure it is some kind of camera issue. Could be wrong though. There, that worked as intended. Well, hopefully you found that helpful. I've got to admit, this one was pretty complicated to script and come up with. But it's all worthwhile if we all make some good RPGs after this is over. We're going to give a little shout out to our monthly supporters on Ko-fi. There they go. And without further ado, if you enjoyed this video, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to the channel. And don't forget to ring the notification bell so you never miss another video. If you wish to support our earnest insanity, you can check the links in the description to donate or buy merch. Until next time, goodbye.